Hey guys, guess what? In this episode, I'm going to be talking about Jesperi Kotkaniemi. So yes, that is what this episode's going to be about in the later portion, the last half, obviously, of this episode. And obviously, you guys know my feelings on KK. But in this episode, it's going to be a little bit different because I am going to be having at least a guest on this episode to discuss with me his feelings about KK too. So at least you have a couple different perspectives on. So first things first, though, I am going to cover the news portion on the episode. A couple news I want to get to, and then in the last half, you will hear my conversation with one of the guests that I'll be having for this episode. So first things first is that Bowen Byram. If you guys do not know that name, he plays for the Buffalo Sabres. And there was a lot of controversy around him and the fact that apparently there were teams eyeing for maybe an offer sheet. Well, the offer sheet is not going to happen because Byram signs a 2-year extension worth $6.25 million contract. And the way I see this contract is a player whose agent, and from what I've heard, is the player's agent is has a reputation of really leading players to free agency to test the market. And what's interesting is after these 2 years, he does become a UFA. So, for what I have seen just from this contract, and I could be wrong, but just from what I'm seeing, is that Kevin Adams, the general manager of Buffalo, decided to be like, you know what, we're gonna give him probably what he wants, but just for 2 years though, so that we can focus on other things with the team because there's a lot of things that this team, I think. I mean, on paper, I think this Buffalo team is good. It's just there. I'm sure there are a lot of other things that needs to be focused on in order for this team to hopefully get over the hump and probably maybe get into the playoffs because this is a team that has missed the playoffs for what feels like 100 years. Technically, it's been like I think 13 or 14 years, but still, that's bad, really, really bad. So we'll see how Byram does in his 2 years with Buffalo. It would not surprise me if those were the last 2 years with Buffalo. Just really wouldn't, knowing that his agent has that reputation. Another thing too is a player out of Columbus decided to be like, you know what, I don't want to be here anymore, and I want to get traded. His name is Igor Chinnikov, and in 30 games, he got a decent amount of points in 30 games this past season with Columbus. He got 7 goals, 18 assists, 15 points. So I would think for a player of that caliber, and with him being only 24 years old, I would think there'd be teams that be looking to possibly get him, maybe. Apparently, what happened is that him and Dean Evanson, who's the head coach for Columbus, kind of did not see things eye to eye. So we'll see how that goes. I think Columbus probably could get a good piece, maybe from a trade of Trinikov. So we'll definitely see what happens there. And that's kind of it around the NHL. Obviously, I do know this, and I'm sure all you Caniacs are like, well, the NHL released the schedule for all the teams. Yes, they have. But I decided to put that in the Hurricanes news. But first, there are a couple things I do want to talk about for the Hurricanes. So, one thing that I found very, very interesting is that apparently it's like Young Stars Week for the NHL. If you've been following them on Twitter or Instagram or X or whatever. And apparently, in their Young Stars Week, they have made rankings. So, like top 10 defensemen under the age of 25, or top 10 forwards under the age of 25. And a couple of Hurricane players were named. Seth Jarvis is ranked ninth for top 10 forwards under 25 years old. I think that is actually very, very good. Now, obviously, when you have rankings or when you display rankings of players around the NHL, there is going to be people that hate it. And, there are probably some players on that list where I'm like, really? This player isn't on there? But regardless, you know what? I am happy Seth Jarvis is on that top 10 list for forwards under the age of 25. And I think he somewhat does deserve it. Seth Jarvis, he's 23 years old, and he's already, I think, a 30 plus goal scorer. I could see him being a 40 goal scorer for just because of how he has been playing for the Hurricanes. An excellent, excellent player, top player, definitely. And another list, too. So the top 10 defensemen under 25, that was a ranking the NHL released too. And they had Alexander Nikishin rated at number 9. And when I saw that, I was a little bit more surprised. Now, the Seth Jarvis thing, that didn't really surprise me because I'm just like, I mean, the guy's popular amongst Hurricanes fans. I would argue he's not only popular amongst Hurricanes fans, but I would say even though he's not like on the popularity scale of like Crosby or McDavid or Kucherov or something, I would say he's somewhat a little bit popular amongst the NHL fans. And I think I would say part of me saying that, I think, is because he's going to be on that Amazon documentary, that Face Off series. I forgot what it's called. He's going to be on this upcoming season. So I think that's part of it too. But congrats to Seth Jarvis. But again, no surprise at all. Nikishin was a surprise to me. And when I saw that Nikishin was on that list, I was like, wow, this is a guy who's only played a few playoff games. And I think everybody can admit he was thrown into the fire in those playoff games. I thought in those few games he kind of started out rough, but got a little bit better, somewhat a little bit better. I wouldn't say much, but somewhat a little bit better and used to the game. Maybe used to the game is a better phrase for Nikishin. But seeing Nikishin ranked number 9th with the amount of games he played, a little bit shocked me. So another thing too, probably the biggest news of the week is that the Hurricanes have announced the schedule for the upcoming season. And I am going to have an episode analyzing the schedule. One thing I will say is that the home opener is on October 9th. So mark your calendars for that date. Home opener against the New Jersey Devils. And hopefully this is a home opener that we can win compared to last year. If you guys remember the home opener last year, we lost to Tampa. So hopefully against New Jersey, we can get a win, and that'll be a good confidence booster for this team. And I think I also saw that we're going to have like a 7-game homestand toward the end of November, early December. So again, I'll have an episode on the whole schedule later. But yeah, I'm excited to know what the dates are for the upcoming schedule for the Hurricanes. A couple other things too is the Hurricanes have signed more prospects. They signed Skylar Brindamore, which, I mean, I don't know if you consider him a prospect just because I think it's pretty well known that he's not going to make the NHL. I mean, I can't see it. Now, if he does, then there's going to be that nepotism question that's going to be coming up in my head. But regardless, Skylar Brindamore, signs a 1-year, 2-way contract, which is the bare minimum, which is $775,000, along with Dominic Fensore. As you can tell, the Hurricanes are kind of shoring up the roster for Chicago with those two players. And again, we'll see how those two players do. Obviously, Skylar Brindamore, I mean, he's a player who we all know his dad. Obviously, he's the head coach for the Hurricanes. Dominic Fensore, who's a defenseman. We'll see how he does with Chicago as well. And last thing I want to say about this, and I'm not going to delve much because I don't think this needs to be delved too much, but Tyler Weiss, who it was born here in Raleigh, signs with Chicago as well. And when I saw that, I was like, you know what? That's really cool. I actually really enjoyed seeing that because you don't really have hardly any players making the NHL, let alone probably. I mean, the AHL, you might have more players, uh, maybe from the Raleigh area making it. But regardless, I like seeing that. And for those of you hockey nerds out there, I don't think he is related to Stephen Weiss, who played for Florida. But regardless, Tyler Weiss, congrats. You get to sign with the Hurricanes affiliate team with the Chicago Wolves. So, yeah, I thought that was just I thought that was pretty cool to see. The only player I know that played in the NHL that's from North Carolina, I think is Jared Bull. But I don't know any players other than that. Oh, no, Logan Brown, I think, was one of them. I think Logan Brown was another. Because I remember him playing for Ottawa and Trip Tracy was mentioning that. So, but regardless, it's cool to see players playing in the AHL or NHL, and they're born here in Raleigh. So that's it for the Hurricanes and NHL news stuff. Now I'm going to switch gears and talk about KK with some of my guests. All right, so I am here with Brandon from the Warning Take and Caniac Sessions, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, awesome. So we're talking about KK. We might have another guest drop in, but we don't know when he's going to drop in, or if he's going to drop in, for that matter. Isn't that right?
Just for the record, he is not in a prison in China, as I alluded to about a certain other friend of ours.
Well, if you guys have probably been watching or listening to Brandon from the Warning Take or Caniac Sessions, then you probably know me as well, because I mean, you and I, we've collaborated a lot.
Many times, especially lately.
Yeah, especially lately. But this episode is going to be on Jesperi Kotkaniemi. And Brandon, I'll say my first question to you. Heading into the home opener, which is already scheduled October 9th against New Jersey, do you expect KK to be in the Hurricanes jersey or no?
Yes.
You do. Explain.
Yes. So I think if he was going to get traded, it would have happened by now. I'm not saying that it's totally out of the question, but I feel like that the trade market and the free agency market kind of was underwhelming this season because everybody, like, seemingly within 48 hours of when the deadline or when the free agency actually started getting traded to somewhere. Like, we saw Marner get signed and traded, or execute a sign and trade, and a bunch of other free agents, Ekblad, Marchand, Bennett, for example, they all stayed with their respective teams basically at the last minute. Brock Besser being another one in Vancouver, and there was all the signs were pointing to him being gone. Mm-hmm. So I think with all those guys coming off the board, that kind of dried up the market for Kotkaniemi to get moved, because everything just kind of came to a stop. And we also saw that everything kind of froze as the market was basically waiting on Ehlers to make a decision before everything else went forward. I think that it's more so for a lack of a suitor as opposed to a lack of a desire to trade him. I think that is very much there. And that's just speculative on my part. I'm not an insider or anything like that. I just personally think that they have probably made plenty of phone calls in regards to moving him out. There just hasn't been anything that worked for both sides yet.
I would agree with that. What's interesting, I don't know if you remember this, Brandon, but remember the whole Elias Pettersson talk about him possibly getting traded. Apparently, Vancouver was interested in KK at the time as part of the return. I don't know if Vancouver's still interested in him now, but would you think he actually carries some value if he does get traded?
Yes. So here's one of the examples I want to put forth with that. One of the things I'm doing over the next couple of months, I'm releasing my top 10 favorite players at defense, wing, and center. When I was putting my list together of my top 10 favorite defensemen, my top 10 favorite wingers, it was pretty easy. I got to number 5 on centers, and I had to really start putting some thought in on which ones I like the most. Because if you look at it historically, the Hurricanes have been thin at that position. And that's even before the Rod Brindamore era.
Yep.
Now, that's a problem that is kind of league wide because it's a hard part of the depth chart to fill. It's the least populated position on your team, other than goalies, and above all, the NHL has expanded twice since 2018, and we're looking at having one or two more potentially between now and 2030, maybe. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there will be some combination of Atlanta and Houston or Milwaukee or something join the league over the course of the next few years, and that's going to dilute the talent pool even further. Free agencies will be less exciting, trades will be less frequent. People are going to lock up the best that they can, and their top 6 centers are going to be a big part of that. Now, even though Jesperi Kotkaniemi is not a top 6 center, and I'm a big fan of the kid, but I'm not going to pretend that he's a definitive 2C. He's not. It's the talent pool in the league as a whole has been getting diluted pretty badly in the last few years. That's part of the reason I'm not really on board with another expansion draft, but it's going to happen. It's inevitable. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I do think that there's a market for him. Now, if you go back in time to when there was less than 30 teams, a player of KK's caliber adjusted for that era wouldn't generate a bunch of interest. Whereas nowadays, having a good middle 6 center with size who can play a physical game, who has shown flashes of being capable of maybe not an elite player, but a very high-end one, that's going to generate some value now more than it ever has.
Yes, I would actually agree with that too, because the smaller amount of teams means more demand or less demand, I guess. But so you do think KK has some trade value? Do you think there's would you be able to list maybe some teams? Maybe do you think that could possibly be interested in KK?
So one, I think, would be San Jose. They have their top
I
two
could,
senator.
yeah.
Their top two
Hmm.
centers are definitive, and that's Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini. Somewhere like Chicago, where essentially, I'm going to list a bunch of teams that, even with all of his faults, he can't make worse. If he goes to San Jose, he's definitively the third line center there. He would have a very
Hmm.
specific role, and they would also want to have someone like him there to protect guys like Celebrini, Smith, and all the other young guys they have there. And he has been in the league for a decent amount of years now. So that's experience that he can give those guys and help develop those players. Same thing with a place like Chicago. After Connor Bedard, who do they really have that's NHL ready at the center position? Not really anybody who's going to be making any kind of a difference. Now, is KK a huge difference maker on a team like that? No. Now, if you're talking about a team that's a little bit more established that could use someone like him, Vancouver is another one that does come to mind, especially after they have moved on from JT Miller. So that's 3 examples that I can think of. If there's a trade for McTavish, I could see Kotkaniemi it would almost be a necessity that he would have to be part of that.
Yes.
To send him to Anaheim. Basically, any team that is either way at the bottom and rebuilding, or any team that is kind of just barely on the outside looking in, could potentially use the services of a player like Kotkaniemi. A team lacking size, a team lacking physicality and depth scoring, which are 3 things that he does provide. That could potentially be any team that fits that criteria could be a suitor for him.
I think of a team like Utah. I
That
mean,
could be another one.
they have very good skill fours, but I think like Carolina, they're pretty small.
Yeah. And, it's like Utah is a place where he could potentially be on the second or the third line, roughly, I would say.
Hmm.
It's just the thing about it is KK makes too much money and he's too good to be a 4th line center, but he's not good enough to be a 2nd line center. That's where him being a 3C would fit, but he's not going to usurp Jordan Stahl so long as Rod is in charge of the team. And that's where I
Yep.
think that everyone, KK, Rod, the front office, that's where all those particular belligerents, if you want to call them that, are at an impasse.
Interesting. Well, so obviously KK, he is still on this team. I mean, we've kind of already talked about like what his role might be in the future. You and I both agree he's not a top 6
No.
player, but I think I'm willing to agree that he could probably. I don't know if I'm there yet with third line center, but I think I would say he's more of a fourth line center. But you do have that thing with Jordan Stahl, um, a player that I'm interested in because I could see a competition there. Jankowski and KK. Do you think Jankowski could boot out KK's job, or do you think KK could play so bad to where Jankowski comes in?
It would be more so the latter. So I like Mark Jankowski. I like him a lot, but 4C is basically the ceiling for him. Now, granted, he's a really, really good one. And we've seen that he has these flashes of extensive offense where he has several games in a row where he produces. When he first got here, it was 7 goals on 7 shots or whatever
it was crazy.
It was. Now, here's where you have to ask, is that sustainable? Is he going to keep doing that? No, that's not going to happen. So it's nice to see players go through stretches like that, but unless your name is Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, or Nathan McKinnon, you don't put numbers like that up consistently and maintain that expectation. It's just not possible. So I think that from a standpoint of Jankowski being better defensively, being a better skater, having a lot more speed than KK, yeah, I think that could happen. However, who I think is ultimately still the better player between the two is KK.
I would agree with that, especially on the offensive side of things. Like, I mean, I love Jankowski, but I mean, I agree with you. I think that scoring was kind of just off of the rush of being traded. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, he won't maintain that production, and he's not expected to. Anybody who thinks that Mark Jankowski is going to continue to play like when he first came here and he was playing that well, I remember people saying, "Hey, we found our 2C." No, hold on. If Mark Jankowski was going to do that, he would have done it already. This guy's been in the league for a while now.
Yes, he has.
If he truly had that capability and could sustain that type of offense, he would have been under a long-term contract, probably in Calgary already, before he went to Nashville and then ultimately came to Carolina. That would have been done already. So, or Nashville maybe would have locked him up long-term as opposed to trading him if that was really a sustainable thing. I think what does KK in more than anything, and we'll elaborate on this more later, but I think what does KK in more than anything is the inconsistencies in his play, because there's times where we see flashes of a 40, 50, maybe even a 60-point player, and then it goes away for whatever reason. When he makes a mistake, when something bad happens, the negativity kind of snowballs with him. There's a great player in there somewhere. Now, granted, he skates like a baby giraffe. I'm not going to pretend that he's a good skater. He's not. And that kind of stands out on the Hurricanes, because if you think about it, everybody on the Hurricanes is a good skater.
Yes.
KK's kind of, it kind of stands out how bad he is. That's one of the things, like, you remember when they had him and Svechnikov and Natchez playing together, you could tell how much better those two guys, especially Natchez, were at skating than KK was. So it really stood out. More than anything for me, I know that a lot of people get mad about the whole idea of me calling KK the Jordan Staal replacement because he's not as good as him defensively. But players like Jordo, pure shutdown 3Cs that chip in some offense, they're going extinct. Jordo's going to be one of the last ones. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's my whole thing about it. It's like, he's not a Jordan Staal replacement on paper as far as what he will do, but as far as where you would pencil him in on the depth chart 5-on-5, he would do that. And he'd probably still stay on the second power play unit, because I think he's been fine there. Does he need to be on the top one? No. Does he need to be killing penalties except when certain guys are out of the lineup? No. But there's enough capable defensive players on this team, enough capable penalty killers on this team, where I think that you can kind of relegate KK to a power play 2 role, a 5-on-5, go out there and throw hits and get greasy goals type of role, and effectively replace the net positives you get with Jordo just by him doing different things when that time comes.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned Jordan Staal, because I feel like one thing that actually favors KK with staying here is the future uncertainty about the center group as a whole. Like Jordan Staal, he's 35, 36 years old.
I think he's 37 now.
He could be 37.
Yeah,
but
I think so.
I mean, you trade KK out. Not to mention, we also traded another young center in Jack Drury to Colorado. The one thing that favors KK of staying here is that you have some certainty with the future with your centers. I'm not saying KK is great, but wouldn't you agree that kind of helps KK?
Yes, that helps him a lot, actually, because, that was part of the reason why Jack Drury got traded, was because when Tyson Jost was in the lineup, he played really well. And, that kind of gave them the breathing room to say, okay, the center depth at the top 2 spots is not the best, but we have enough to where we can include Jack Drury in this trade and make it happen, because without that, that trade doesn't happen. And as much as Mikko Rantanen is a bruise on this franchise the last few years, we got a really good player out of it with Logan Stankoven.
Yes, we did. And I've said this on future past episodes too, but I feel like part of being a good general manager is taking those big risks. So I don't blame Tulsky for pulling the trigger on Rantanen.
I don't either, because how many times did we hear over the years, especially at the trade deadline, do something, do something, do something? Why are we standing idle at the trade deadline again? Like 22-23 was a perfect example. They stood pat at the deadline, and then Svechnikov got hurt. And that really sucked because I was at that game. So that was a horrible thing to see. That's where it's kind of like Tulsky swung for the fences, and, the ball got caught at the warning track. At least he did something. At least he's proactive. At least he's aggressive. And, we spent years wanting someone to do something. He did something. It didn't work out ultimately. Well, I mean, maybe not in the short term. If you ask me, we've got such a good and complete player in Stankoven that whole circus might have been worth it. I think it, looking at it early on, I think it was. But if people think that the center depth of this team is bad right now, if you move KK out for anything other than someone who can play center at his level or better, which there's not that many out there, then you will really see a problematic forward group constructed on this team.
Yes. I do want to look at like KK's past here. I mean, obviously his first season with the Hurricanes, I mean, he only got 12 goals, 17 assists, 29 points. And at that point, I think he was still considered a rookie, wasn't he? Because he only played...
I don't think so.
Oh, really? I thought he only played... Okay, yeah, no, never mind.
Yeah, his rookie season was in Montreal.
It was. My bad. But he got 29 points. And Brandon, I mean, obviously, I think there were quite a few fans. I mean, what do you think of that offer sheet that brought him here?
Well, see, what was funny about it, I remember me and my dad were joking about this years ago, like when Aho's offer sheet happened. I remember I'm like, it's going to be really funny when we offer sheet KK in a few years. And I was looking forward to that because I was hoping he was going to wear 15 because, as you know, one of my favorite players ever is Tuomo Ruutu. So I love
Ruutu.
Ruutu was my boy. That was the first sweater I ever got, other than my my Sammy Kapanen one that my dad gave me.
Yeah.
So I was really, really looking forward to the idea of maybe that happening, but we're like, oh, that's a pipe dream. It's a joke. And that's never going to happen. And I was laid up on the couch and I was sick as a dog. And I remember seeing this text from my dad, and I'm thinking that like the fever is making me hallucinate and see things that weren't actually there. And I see this text from my dad that said the Hurricanes had tendered the offer sheet to KK. I'm like, nah, this is a prank. You're messing with me because I'm sick. And then I look at it and I go, oh, wow, they actually did it. Okay, This is great. Now, one other thing I do want to offer in regards to KK from our friend Aaron Manning writes. There was a tweet that she put out one time, and I asked her to message me the gist of it. So here's what she says in this. It's kind of long. Basically, I'm looking at 5-on-5 points in both total and per 60 minutes. From natural stat trick, the Canes' top three centers line up like this. Aho had 30 5-on-5 points, Stahl had 28, and KK had 31. When you factor in their 5-on-5 time on ice, Aho produced at a rate of 1.68, 5-on-5 per 60. Stahl 1.78 5-on-5 points per 60, and KK 1.93 5-on-5 points per 60. So both in actual 5-on-5 points and the rate on 5-on-5 production per 60 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time, Kotkaniemi was the Canes' most productive center at 5-on-5. The fact that he doesn't play on the penalty kill, which scores a ton, and that his power play deployment was 1 minute and 20 seconds on power play too, which is frankly awful last season. It's why his overall points remain so low, because there's nothing wrong with his 5-on-5 production given his deployment. To expand on that, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, KK seems like, and people are going to disagree with me on this, but I'm going to stand by it. It seems like when someone makes a mistake, typically it's kind of like, okay, don't do it again. When KK makes a mistake, Rod sends him down the depth chart before he does anybody else. He went to the media to defend Brent Burns on multiple occasions, which is fine. Coaches should defend their players, especially if they feel strongly about how well they've played or how what they bring to the table for the team. I don't feel like KK got any courtesy like that, regardless of anything that he did correctly or incorrectly. So that's just my personal observation of it. It seems to me KK was a little bit of the redheaded
I
stepchild.
have a different view on
Okay.
that. And I mean, you look at Brent Burns. I mean, now granted, Jordan Stahl, it's hard to pick his game and be like, oh, he made a huge flaw right there with Jordan Stahl. But with KK, I would argue the last 3 seasons, and I'm not even going to say his first season with us, but it's just because we had Trocheck at the time, and no one's going to kick Trocheck out of the second line center job. But is my perspective is that Brittamore has given him 3 seasons to try, and it hasn't really worked out.
It hasn't yet. But
Yeah.
my whole thing with it is it's just I feel like that a lot of players are given more runway to make up for their mistakes, to go out the next shift and, make up for whatever they did wrong the previous one. I don't feel like KK gets that. It seems to me like that whenever he makes a mistake, or even one of his line makes a mistake, they shuffle everything up. And I know Rod preaches all this stuff. There's no 1 to 4 lines. Yeah, maybe you look at it that way. But at the end of the day, some players are more valuable than others. If you need a goal at the end of the game, Aho's out there, not Jordan Stahl, except maybe to win the faceoff. But
I agree.
If you need to protect a 1-goal lead, yeah, sure. Jordan Stahl and Jordan Martinook are probably out there. Aho's probably out there, but Svechnikov probably has more empty net goals than anybody on the team. So he's out there in those situations. And, at the beginning of his career defensively, he was a train wreck.
Yeah, he was.
He's gotten much better.
Yeah, Svetch, when it comes defensively, he's not the best. But I've done a future. This is going to be in the future, like in August. But I've done an episode on Svetch, so
yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that one. But it's like not every single forward needs to be a Selke candidate. Not every single forward needs to score 100 points. But if we're talking about like a team that lacks physicality, KK does have that. When his confidence goes downhill, that physicality kind of goes away. But when he's playing well, we've seen what he does when he lays the body on people. Look at what he did to Cal Clutterbuck. Look at him fighting Dylan Cousins on the opening faceoff and getting that game going. Look at, him fighting Alexei Torpachenko. I'm not saying that you need to have one-dimensional enforcers anymore. But as far as having somebody out there who's going to go out there and lay the body on people, you don't have many guys will do it on this team. KK is one of them.
I will agree with you on that. With KK, it seems like even if it's not like a Dylan Cousins type of fight, like, because I thought we saw this in the playoffs at moments this past playoff run, in the fact like once the play is dead and there's a huge scrummage, it seems like I always see KK coming in defense, and I KK props on that. And the kid's a big guy. I always thought of him as a guy that has all the tools to be a top 6 center. He just doesn't have that finished goods delivery.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I so like you've heard me say before about Necas. I believe that Martin Necas had more raw, God-given talent than anybody that ever played for the Hurricanes. However, he could never put it together.
There's Semin.
I hated Alexander Semin. He's definitely in
the
top 10.
He didn't care. He didn't care, though.
No. It's just like he's just kind of like, oh, my hand hurts. And he just goes from, a 40-goal season to 6 the next season.
But he still had so much natural talent.
He did. He had all the natural God-given talent in the world. See, KK doesn't. But it's not it's not like he goes out there and does cardio. It's not like he doesn't go out there and try. Now, KK's not going to win any Selkies. He's not going to win any Hart trophies, but I still think he's a valuable player in that regard. Because let's say you do just move him out for something other than a center. 2 years from now, Jordan Stahl, you could see him extend for another year. I think he's capable of it. But, there's a lot of unknowns there. You don't know if Jordan Stahl is going to extend. You don't know if Ivan Ryabkin is going to pan out to play center. You don't know if you're going to acquire another center. Those are all unknown variables. What KK brings to the table, for better or worse, you kind of already know what you got with him.
Yes. Now, part of that I kind of blame on management and the fact that, I mean, we've been talking about the second line center problem for years. And it seems like it's not just a second line center problem. It's that do they even value of getting a good center, whether it's second line or not? Like, I'm not saying Jordan Stahl or Aho are bad centers, but it's just you look at some of these teams. Like I, you know who I think has a good center core? Tampa,
Yes, they have an
especially
excellent
when
one.
they had Stamkos. I think Ottawa has a decent one.
They do. And I remember one thing when Tampa was when the idea of Ehlers was going there was floating around. I was kind of
Hmm.
like, well, if they have to clear cap space, I know exactly who I'd overpay for to get from Tampa, and that's Anthony Cirelli. That would have never happened, obviously, but like as far as like dream acquisitions that I have to fill that role, Anthony Cirelli was near the top of the list. Like he wasn't Tage Thompson or Dylan Larkin, but he's still a really good player that would fit into that role just fine. And I think that's another thing that goes back to why I think KK is going to be on the opening night roster. We're going to have to see teams start falling out of contention before they start moving on from a player like Dylan Larkin or a player like Tage Thompson. I'm not saying that either one of those guys will get traded if both those teams do fall out of contention. You know, I think Detroit is going to make a really hard push for the playoffs. Buffalo will do what they always do. They're going to start out really strong and then they're going to fall off a cliff. And then maybe a player like Tage Thompson becomes available. That's a distinct possibility. But unless you're getting a player like that back, a definitive upgrade, or at least a player on par with KK, there's not really anything that the team can do right now. So that's why I think that they're just going to have to hold on to him for the time being. That being said, even though it was very different circumstances, Justin Falk was traded during training camp.
No, he was. That came out of nowhere too. Like I did not
It
think
did.
St. Louis was gonna get him.
I didn't either. I was like, well, he's still here. They clearly are planning on keeping him. And then they made the trade that they did and everything to bring in, I believe it was Dominic Bach and Joel Edmondson, if I remember correctly. And I really
I
liked
love Steady Eddie.
Steady Eddie was my boy, man. I really wanted it. When they
Yeah.
were looking at free agency year before last, me and the other Sam were actually talking about it, and I was like, you know, if they brought Edmondson back, I wouldn't be upset. Like he doesn't provide you a ton of offense because he's got a really heavy shot, though. He gets it on net, he gets shots through, and people create, you know, goals off of that. Defensively, remarkable. Had size,
Physically.
very
Physically
physical.
yes.
Yeah, I would have loved to have brought him back. He's someone that had things lined up a little bit differently. I would have loved for the Canes to have kept him long term, but it just didn't work out that way. So I'm not saying that it's impossible for KK to get traded before training camp. It's just it doesn't look like the circumstances are lining up for that to be a possibility at the moment.
Yeah. Which is to me kind of frustrating from a podcast standpoint because if they do it, I'd rather them do it now
Yeah,
than maybe sometime in August as I'm like pre-recording some episodes. But another thing with KK that I do want to talk about, I mean, you look at his line mates in the past, most of them have been basically surrounded by two players, Fetch and Netchus. And I can't remember which season. I think it might have been a couple seasons ago where that line was really, really going. KK wasn't doing much, but he was holding the line steady.
yeah,
Do you think we could see something like that this
maybe.
season?
It's like here's one thing with the KK Natchez Svechnikov line in 22-23. In my opinion, that was Carolina's best line. I really believe that. What KK was doing well for that line, he created opportunities by separating players from the puck below the goal line in the offensive zone by, you know, going down there and throwing hits. Puck would pop out, and then Natchez would go get it, or Svechnikov would go get it and try and generate something from there. One thing that KK is really good at that flies under the radar because it's not really reflected statistically, it's not anything you see on a whole lot of highlight reels. KK is really good at generating breakouts from the defensive zone. Not the best at getting the puck back, but once he does, as far as him making those quick heads up plays, he's pretty solid at that. Face-offs, you know, yeah, he hovers below 50 sometimes, but it's not 1994. Face-offs are not as valuable as they used to be. If you watch an old hockey game from like the pre-lockout, like, you know, the ones they show on NHL Network all summer, I remember there was one time I was watching Game 6 between Buffalo and Dallas in 1999. And one of the things that this was when Bill Clement and Gary Thorne were the guys doing the calls for
Yeah, I remember them.
ESPN. And I absolutely love Gary Thorne. Just want to throw that out there. Like, he's the only guy that I like as much as Forsland as far as calling games. One thing that him and Clement were talking about, there was a face-off in the end of the second period, I want to say it was, and they had 33 seconds left, and they were saying that's not a whole lot of time for them to get possession and score. 33 seconds nowadays is enough time to score twice.
Yes, it is.
So face-offs I don't think are as valuable as they used to be, because face-offs back then guaranteed you a good 15, 20 seconds of possession if you managed the puck well. Nowadays, that's not so much the case. So even if you are a 48% face-off center, you're still pretty valuable, because even if you have someone who hovers around somewhere between 53 and 55 at times, like Jordan Stahl does, you're not going to have the puck for as long as you would have when you want to face off 10, 15 years ago, maybe even less than that. So there's also that to consider. So if you ask me, if someone's not below 48, 47, it's not that big of a deal nowadays. And KK's like zone time, as far as his offense or his zone starts and everything, where he takes faceoffs, it happens more in the offensive zone, it seems, which ultimately it's less valuable if you lose it there. And with the way the Hurricanes forecheck, even when they lose faceoffs in the offensive zone, a lot of times they get the puck back anyway.
Yes. Well, I think like hockey's kind of evolved too. If you kind of look at it, like back then, like you talked about that era, that was known as the dead puck era, as you probably
Yeah, because it was so slow.
It was so slow, and then they did some rule changes. I think they took out the red line rule.
That was the most significant rule change they ever made, if you ask me, is taking out 2-line pass. That's the biggest difference between hockey then and hockey now. That's part of the reason the fighting actually slowed down a little bit, because guys weren't bumping into each other so much and getting mad and throwing their gloves off. That's one reason why that started going away, other than, it transitioning to a speed and skill game as opposed to a heavy hitting and slower one. So that was one thing about it. But I think that if he can get back above 50 in the faceoffs, because it's still beneficial, it's not as valuable as it used to be, he's got to improve the defensive side of his game. And like I've said before, KK's biggest enemy is his skating. I hope he did not touch a stick all summer and just focused on his skating. If he can do that, his game would improve significantly, because when you skate well, you do a lot of other things well. A lot of those times where he turns pucks over and fans on shots, it's because he's kind of, off balance.
Yeah.
If he fixes that.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I'm grabbing some water.
I mean, so you kind of touched on the whole skating thing there, but it kind of like the root of all of his problems. But I was just going to add, I think he needs to have a better hockey IQ, a better sense to his game, because it seems like, especially under Brandyn Moore's system, that you have to have a good hockey IQ, a good sixth sense. Like you look at players like Jarvis, Stankoven. I think Stankoven is probably one of the smartest players with the puck.
Yeah, he is.
I mean, they excel under Brandyn Moore's system because you kind of need that under Brandyn Moore's system in the way of you gotta be smart and manage the puck well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And sometimes it's not the puck. Like, I mean, I've had my issues with KK. I'm just going to say here right now, but I lost it in our elimination game against Florida.
That stupid penalty he took?
With that stupid penalty he took.
That was a very stupid penalty.
I lost it. I yelled in my apartment so loud.
No, the holding penalty he took. Yeah, that was dumb.
It was a bear hug.
Yeah, you can't get away with that. Even in the playoffs, you're not going to get away with that. Now, I think as far as the hockey IQ thing goes, the skating would improve that. And the reason I say that, if he improves his skating, that's going to be greater ability for him to, create separation when someone's like forechecking on him, when he's trying to exit, or when he's trying to hem someone in the offensive zone and all that type of stuff. It'll be a little bit easier for him to do stuff like that if he skates better, because he'll be able to create that time and space, create that separation, and he doesn't have to make his quick decisions. Like when he's in situations where he's caught totally flat-footed, that's when he tends to turn the puck over, because he doesn't have time and space. Someone gaps up on him really quick, and he has to make a decision that usually the two options are bad and worse in a very unfavorable position. Then he gets kind of off balance, and then next thing you know, he's throwing it up the middle of the ice right back to someone on the other team. And if he cleans up the skating a little bit to create a little bit more time and space for himself so he can make those decisions, then I think that the hockey IQ will accelerate with that, because when you have more time to make decisions, then you tend to be able to make better decisions as far as where you want to pass the puck or whether you want to skate it out yourself and all that type of stuff. So I think that there's a little bit of a correlation there.
Yeah, there could be. I mean, my whole thing with the skating thing, I mean, to me, a player that was the best player in terms of his skating ability on this team, we traded him, but he was making dumb moments a lot, and that was Netches.
Yeah, that, and it's like Carolina wouldn't have been able to pay him what he's allegedly looking for, because like you've seen the stuff about Nate just looking for $10 million. That's not going to happen. Maybe some bottom feeder team will pay him that, but Carolina won't. Colorado won't. I still think he's staying in Colorado personally. He's not going to get that kind of money though.
I think he stays in Colorado just because I think that system suits him well.
Yeah, especially if he's playing with McKinnon.
Yeah, and I think every player that plays with McKinnon, listen, you're going to be good. You just are. But I'm not trying to diminish Netch's performance, but that's just reality. So, Brandon, thank you for coming on. Thought we could have AB on, but I guess he just couldn't come on.
No, that's unfortunate, because I know that he has some. He would have been the spiciest out of all three of us in regards to KK. But the one other caveat I'll say, if he has a good start to the season, it can go either way. But I think if he has a good start to the season, that kind of accelerates the possibility of him getting traded, because his trade stock will go up. Teams will be more interested in him and all that. But even if he has a bad one, I think maybe they'll take less of a return to get him out, as long as they bring another center back in, because you could move KK in one move and then bring a center in with a different transaction. That's totally possible. But I just personally don't think the kid is as bad as people make him out to be. I really don't.
I think if he's on this team, I think he's going to produce around the same rate as he has been, just because it's already been 3 pretty much consecutive seasons.
You know what you're getting.
Yeah, you kind of do, I think, at this point, but you never know. I hope I'm wrong. That's what I like to say about players that are struggling. I hope, please prove me wrong. Please be that top 6 player or top goal scorer that you can be.
If he does turn into that, you already know I've got so many things bookmarked on X. I'm going to go through there and be like, update. What about now? Huh? How about now?
Yep, it's going to be an interesting season. Oh, and I do have a hot take, though, because, I mean, again, I kind of was expecting kind of KK to be traded. And I think part of it, too, is just because with the signing of Ehlers, you have more players than roster positions. But I'm kind of developing a hot take in the fact that I don't think we start to see trades probably till probably maybe training camp. I just
At least then.
Not just the Hurricanes, but the whole league.
Yeah, I could see that, but it's also like I think it's actually going to wait until teams start falling out of contention is when that's going to happen, because there's nothing to make the market move right now.
I thought Ehlers was going to move the market, but it hasn't really.
No, I thought it was going to really open up after that. Because we were
too.
sitting there talking about it when Carolina signed him. You and I were sitting there saying, "Oh, it's going to pop off now," and it never did. But that just also goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the show, with the expansion drafts kind of diluting the talent pool in the last few years, and people are holding on to players that a few years ago they didn't care if they held on to them, especially after they saw the way Vegas fleeced the league in their expansion draft. They got Riley Smith and Jonathan Marchessault.
Yeah, well, I think a huge part of that is the fact that it was the very first expansion draft, and teams did not know what they were doing.
Vegas played that.
They figured it out with Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle, they had the same rules, but everyone was already wise to the game after what happened with Vegas. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to enrich an expansion franchise like we did before. And that's the thing with, like, when you look at the expansion drafts of the past, like Columbus and Nashville being relatively sort of recent examples of that, those teams struggled mightily when they first started because of how restrictive expansion draft rules were then.
Yes, they definitely were. Well, Brandon, thank you for coming on. And how about you just tell the audience where they can find you?
Thank you for having me. So I'm only on YouTube and I'm only on X. Both of them are at The Warning Take. And that's the only two platforms I'm on at the moment. I've considered expanding to Instagram. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that yet or not. But yeah, so basically I post statistical stuff, opinions. I do analytical videos about the players where I, use video to break down stuff and everything like that. And I'm also a co-host on Caniac Sessions, which you can find also on YouTube and X and Instagram at Caniac Sessions.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brandon. And I will see you guys Monday.